when Labour was run by Jeremy Corbyn, one of the constant criticisms you saw of his party by the newspapers and just general people within Labour themselves was that apparently Jeremy Corbyn, if he got into office, he wouldn't be able to stop campaigning. That Jeremy Corbyn was more about the protest than actually being a government. Now, I completely dismissed those criticisms because here's the thing. Corbyn actually had policy he wanted to do. Now, because the newspaper lot, shall we say, was so concerned about that, and even other people who used to give out that criticism used to ignore that fact that, hey, he has this manifesto full of stuff that he would actually want to do, and at some point protesting and bringing attention to things is a good thing as well. As the opposition, as the leader of the opposition, that's what he did and brought attention to subjects. Again, sort of the job description. But of all things now, it is very, very obvious that we currently don't have a government. What we have is, especially under Boris and Cummings, is a government that is obsessed with announcements and gimmicks. This is not a government. Boris Johnson, I generally can't know, or at least can't think of any policy at the moment his party is pushing beyond Brexit. I generally struggle to think. I'm sure if I went online, I could probably find some of what Conservatives were trying to do in Parliament today, or bills they were trying to get through. But off the top of my head, I generally can't think of anything. And we actually come to today, this piece in The Guardian, discussing just that. So the government's frenetic campaign to, quote, save our summer has suspended the normal rules of the silly season. Amid the many confusing and shifting statements about the lockdown, Number 10 has announced a strategy to reduce obesity, plans for a cycling and walking revolution, a bonfire of planning laws, and more ominously, the establishment of the panel to recess judicial limits to state power. You might have even missed the start of an online constitution on flood risk management in Carlisle. The £400,000 spending repairing a flood wall in Hereford, or Chancellor Rishi can't say I can never say his name right. Rishi Sunak's visit to Selensky, North Yorkshire, to learn about the flood alleviation. Meanwhile, 127 employers were given awards for supporting the armed forces. Transport Secretary Grant Sharps announced the $589 million to kickstart rail upgrades across the north. Plans for congestion busting near Swindon were unveiled, and the monument to the Battle of Gallipoli was restored. 20 years ago, Conservatives accused New Labour of initiationites, the legislative inconsequence, endlessly moving from one gimmick announcement to the next. The current government appears to suffer from a similar affliction. Young governments, like young people, are eager to prove themselves and be approved, but short on patience, and the ambitious personnel in key government departments are keen to demonstrate their on-message competence. This government initiates, of course, is also about politicking. Number 10, not for the first time in history, is staffed by campaigners in the place of policy specialists. The pandemic and Brexit are both complex policy challenges that our government has proven uniquely ill-equipped to actually address. Governing by announcement is a way to distract the press and public from the truth of this incompetence. Bashing judges and praising veterans and publicising investment in the North is red meat to throw at one part of the electorate. appearing serious about diet, exercise, and green transport is the vegan meat substitute for another. This permanent campaigning mindset is how we do government now. The phenomenon of the permanent campaign was named in a 1980 book by an American journalist and political advisor, Sidney Baumhall. His argument was that government decision-making was increasingly based on assessments not of what might be good policy, but on what would look good and keep sponsors on board and appeal to key voters. The government has been reduced to an instrument designed to sustain an elected official's popularity, and it was the tail that was wagging the dog. Boris Johnson's permanent campaign is symptomatic of a deeper change in our politics. Even before the Tories won the 2019 election, Britain was becoming a post-democracy. One of the founding propositions of the 20th century mass democracy has been that government should act not for the few, but for everyone. Sorry, getting a phone call there. Was that there we are. The mass government democracy had been that the government should act not for the few, but for everyone. Inherent in this idea was a concept of the public interest or the common good. We might not be sure what this is, but we certainly won't be able to agree on it. But in a democracy, so the argument goes, we can come together politically and our representatives will broker a settlement between the competing interests of various social and economic political groups. Such groups are now more complex and less stable. People's occupational, economic, and even geographical locations are more likely to vary over a lifetime. Connections between distant social interests and their political representatives have been attuned in our post-democracy. Aggregators of individual tests and preferences expressed through opinion polls and surveys have displaced parties and other civic forums as a means by which government comes to understand the people. Instead of public interest, we now find public opinion. Indeed, this government has spent more on polling between January and May this year than the whole of 2019. In place of elections or collective deliberation, opinion polls serve as an ongoing referendum on government providing a consistently updated information about people's attitudes and reactions, vital for the formation of campaign strategies. There is an argument that this has been a good thing. It means that the government is continually praised of and attentive to public opinion, able to incorporate public concerns within policy making. If people want a war memorial repaired, and if, in search of their support, politicians repair it, then perhaps democracy is working well. The counter-argument is that governments are no longer experts in governing. Instead, they only think according to the short-term campaign strategies, choosing to do what is most popular rather than what is best for the people. As the academic and former government advisor Patrick Diamond puts it, this damaging short-termism becomes epidemic. A government focused on eye-catching initiatives, as we have seen it, is not prepared for or equipped to deal with a pandemic. In our post-democracy, public opinion is not the only source of policy. It is also an object of policy. Public attitudes and outlooks and behaviour are now the central focus of government policy, the goal of which has not changed the situations of people find themselves in. But to change people's feelings about their situations, post-democracy government is not unconcerned with what you think or what you need, but it doesn't require your participation. It just needs to know how you might respond to various things it might do to you. What the Prime Minister's chief advisor Dominic Cummings understands is that most politicians do not, is that polling, surveys and focus groups don't tell you what people think or what public opinion definitely is. They provide a rough roadmap of possibilities and probabilities of what people might come to think, and depending on various potential scenarios and actions in the Leave campaign, different variations and adverts were tested, refined and retested in what Cummings called a constant inversion process. The combined with feedback from polls and focus groups in government, this approach has turned the Tories' permanent campaign into a permanent experiment, and the endless measuring and testing for means of management and shaping political attitudes. We are the subjects of this ongoing experiment, the single data points in a larger firmament. That, in a post-democracy, is what constitutes citizenship. And it won't save summer. It might if you enjoy your half-price Sunak-branded meal next Monday, Tuesday or Wednesday, or change how you feel about its loss. And that's where we are. I completely agree. We have got a government that is just in complete, continuous, ongoing campaign mode, and this is not how you do. It's not how you run a government. And sometimes governments have to do stuff that is unpopular, but in the long run, it's going to turn out to be a good thing. You know, be it new roads or bypasses or things like that. You see this all the time, like the idea of upgrading the North Rail network. That money has been around for years and nothing's been done with it. So I'm not expecting it anytime soon, I can tell you that. But unfortunately, this is how our government runs. And as was said there, the short-termism is damaging to us and our country. This is not how a government should run things. It has to think not only in the short term, but long term as well. And apparently our government just doesn't want to do that. It would rather just rely on opinion polls and hope that everything goes well. But there you go. So anyway, we'll see you next time.